This discussion focuses on how secure production and supply, how to reestablish domestic refining and upstream capacity, and how to build resilient value chains that support industrialization across the continent. To lead our final panel, please welcome the Senior Vice President at the African Energy Chamber, Werner Ayukegba. Joining Werner, please help me welcome Executive Manager at the CEO's Office, Nazim Braf. Executive Director, CEO, South African Oil and Gas Alliance, Adrian Strydom. Commercial Leader, Clarke Energy, Neale. Founder and CEO, Rich Africa Consultancy, Salma Shimutikweni. And lastly, please help me welcome to the stage Business Development Manager, BP Southern Africa, Lwazi Sihlobo. Thank you so much. Over to you, Werner.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here still. This is our last panel. Unfortunately, we do not have too much time, so we're going to jump straight into it. But I just want to say we've seen since the morning a couple of spirited conversations all around what's going on with respect to energy, G20 topics, a lot of things around access, affordability, and of course, infrastructure. This particular topic, which we're discussing here, is pretty much around maximizing the value chains around oil and gas. So we heard, for example, His Excellency the Minister talk about Sandpec and put Nazim and his boss on the spot, talking about creating essentially a national champion for petroleum. And I guess what he was also alluding to was a sense of ultimately looking at maximizing value across the entire value chain, which is what we're talking about. And when I look at that, the question really is to be able to ask you, what's the timeline? What are we looking at in terms of implementing what I think is an extremely complex process in terms of taking together a whole bunch of subsidiaries, putting them in together, as well as looking outside to be able to maximize from the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream. What timeline are we looking at then, Nazim, in terms of implementing and making that reality?
Thank you. And as you quite rightly so, it is quite a complex process. Typically, in the case of a normal M&A transaction, a merger or an acquisition, you will have the legal completion activities and then obviously pooling the assets and off you go, design the organization. The SANPC is slightly different because you have existing entities operating whilst you have a bill going through Parliament. However, it was very clear through the motivation of the Minister and the President that we need to get going. And therefore, with the appropriate expertise, a lease and assign model was implemented. So effectively, SANPC take possession or ownership, not ownership, but use of the assets. So that assets is now coming across and we can use that over a long period of time until eventually the legal formalities are there. So we have access to the assets, we will operate the assets, the people has been transferred to operate those assets. So therefore, from an integrated perspective, it is the upstream activity. The UPRDA bill obviously allows for 20% free carry. There's no ambiguity because that 20% is critical for the sustainability of the SANPC. If we look at major national oil companies, the upstream is the major footprint, and that project is critical. So for us, from an SANPC perspective, that is critical. It's a short window that we want to go ready and apply for blocks and utilize that.
Are you looking at SANPC becoming an operator of blocks? I mean, we're looking, they're talking about drilling in the Caribbean, whatever, or are you looking to partner and be basically a partner in an operatorship?
Absolutely. Strategic partnership is very critical. The SANPC needs to be capacitated as we build the capability and the expertise, and therefore, at this point in time, partnership and strategic partnership. Turning to the midstream and the downstream, I mean, the market opportunity is here. South Africa has just become the biggest importer of finished product in May on the continent. So the opportunity is there. The state access is limited, and I think Minister is very clear that needs to change. And needless to say, the last part is the downstream, which is equally, state participation is limited.
Very sorry to put you on the spot. When are we going to have the refineries back up and running?
I think, as my colleague, CEO Sisako Mahatla explained, I think there's a lot of activities to look at, assessments to be done, securing funders, looking at the refining envelope. And I think the one thing is very important. When the refineries were built in South Africa in 1963 to 69, it was built against a very different backdrop.
Yeah.
It was there to make sure South Africa is self-sufficient for political reason. I think if you look at the landscape at the moment, you have refinery in West Africa, you have refineries coming about in the Libido corridor, Zambia has announced refinery. So I think you're going to look at the envelope very wider today in where's your market. So I think that will determine when refineries is going to be kickstarted. Needless to say, Mossel Bay is a top priority, as he has explained.
Fair enough, thank you. Adrian, I'll come to you. You represent Sauga, which is working pretty much with a whole bunch of folks in South Africa who are involved in the entire value chain.
Correct.
When we talk about value chain maximization, I'm not looking just at South Africa. I'm also looking at the entire continent in that sense. And we look, for example, at Mozambique, or we look at Namibia. It always wonders me why we don't see much more interconnection, working together, South African companies doing more work in that sense in some of these neighboring countries to be able to get that value creation in that sense. What do we need to see to get more South African companies, for example, being active in Namibia as well as in Mozambique, in Angola, for example, in this particular energy space?
Sure. I think you are right in the sense that we could always get more South African companies busy in the region. I was surprised.
Of course, in partnership with local companies in those particular
Sure,
areas.
absolutely. I was surprised to see the number of South African companies active in the region. And I'm privileged to have been in Namibia, in Mozambique, and Angola as well. And I came across a number of South African companies actively. Some of our members, in fact, one of the ways in which we are approaching accessing and providing access opportunities in the neighboring countries is to, we do regular outbound missions into those countries where we take our member companies and we set up business-to-business networking sessions. We develop that. Our conference in March, let me advertise that a bit, is in fact a Southern African oil and gas conference. So the Southern Africanness is there to actually engage and encourage greater collaboration. So yes, I agree with you, we need to do more. But I was surprised. We went to a gas-to-power facility in Mozambique a few years ago. And I was surprised when I asked invariably at different spots of the facility, who built this part of the gas-to-power facility, and very, very pleasantly surprised that it was done by South African companies invariably. So, yes, a lot more. of that kind of support needs to happen. A lot more needs to happen, but we see quite a bit happening in terms of cross-border collaboration and growing.
Karen, let me come to you. Clarke Energy doing a lot in the power space, gas to power as well. What is your outlook when you look at the gas to power space in that sense? Clearly, it's been stated, the minister was talking about very soon lifting the moratorium on drilling to be able to access gas in the Karoo and some other regions. What else needs to be done for us to see more gas molecules getting in to be able to generate power on the continent? The market is there clearly. We have gas in Mozambique, even if it wasn't in South Africa. Unfortunately, a whole bunch of those contracts you were seeing clearly by people who came in pretty early. Some of the major companies, none of them South African. If you look at Namibia, for example, there is significant gas, some of it in the past stranded. We're hoping that that's going to come back in. What do you think we need to see to be able to see gas to power projects broadly, more of them on a common, not just the big ones, but also the small ones?
So can you hear me all right with the mic? Yeah, it's working. So one of the things here, and people maybe don't understand, there is not a lack of demand for projects. I have a list of projects longer than this room of people who are looking for 100 megawatts, 40 megawatts, 10 megawatts, and even smaller, 500 kilowatts, a megawatt in size. The problem is the molecules. And it all comes back to having molecules available to sell. Right? You have the demand. You even have funders who are willing to take those projects on for the customer who can't do it themselves. But unfortunately, getting to a bankable project without confirmed gas supply is near impossible. How are you going to take a bankable project for 5, 10, 15, 20 years if nobody can guarantee you a gas supply for that time?
Is that why we're talking about a gas cliff in South Africa?
Exactly what it is. The gas cliff is a little bit, Jacko is not here, so I think I can moan about his presentation to tell everyone about the gas cliff. But it's given a bit of a loom over the market, right? It's a little bit false. I personally, touch wood, don't think we're going to lose gas. It's not going to cliff off like it's been sort of talking about. What's going to happen is it is going to degrade. The gas that we're currently getting through the Romco pipeline from the Pimani Basin is going to go down. But there are alternative sources of gas. You've just listed some of them. We have indigenous gases in South Africa. We have West Coast gases. We have the CBM in Botswana that's been talked about for the last 15 years and is still not out the ground.
So what do we need to do to unlock those projects?
Honestly, it all comes back to sovereign guarantees. We can take it all down the pipeline and work through what it needs to be, but for any of the big gas companies to be willing to come and invest in South Africa, they need to have a guarantee that there is an off-taker. Right? Industry is not small enough to do that on its own. Iguasa has done a lot of work to try and aggregate industry, but it's not enough. You need it at a government level.
I mean, I always struggle whenever we talk about sovereign guarantees in that sense, because it's evident to everybody that the market is there. Are we just not structuring in the right way? I mean, the age of sovereign guarantees, you would agree with me, Samira, it's extremely difficult in a lot of countries.
But it works with the REAP program. So why can't it work with the gas to power program? Right? Without the sovereign guarantees behind any of the renewable energy projects, we wouldn't have what we have on the ground now. We're on bid window 7 or whatever we're on. Because there's an off-taker, a guaranteed off-taker with a take or pay. That allows international investment, local investment to say we will go into that market. We need the same in the gas field, and that then allows it to tread down to the downstream, to my 1 megawatt customer who is desperate to get off the grid. And not only because the grid at this stage isn't reliable, we know that, the other side is there's a lot of benefits from moving to gas to power. Gas to power isn't just about energy, it's about using the energy in multiple sources, right? So you have combined heat and power, where we recover the heat from the gas engines and we give you steam or hot water. Or even, the huge data center opportunity that we see in South Africa. We've got subsea cables here that make this not just South Africa, actually there's about 5 or 6 regions across Africa, which are set for being hyper data center areas. But to get that, you need energy. And you need that energy for, yes, the IT structure, but the cooling structure, which you can get from recip engines. Right? You can do absorbent chiller cooling, comes from that same molecule of gas. So now instead of it becoming a fossil fuel being burned again, It's a fossil fuel with more benefits to it. You're getting like a 90% efficiency instead of a 40% efficiency.
Yeah.
People need to understand the full benefit you can get from gas to power on a grand scale. As I say, from small projects to 100 megawatts. And in Clarke, we do that. We cover projects small to large across the world.
So are we seeing, or are we likely to see in your assessment more gas to power projects on the continent, or are you not that optimistic, given the fact that those government guarantees are not very forthcoming? I mean, at the moment, at
There are
least.
projects, right? So there's projects now, there's projects we're building now, but those are with companies that are willing to take the risk,
Yeah.
that have lived through the story maybe in another country, and you're taking that and putting it into their plays in South Africa. So greenfield sites here that are coming in, putting in full CHP sites for their facility, and that will be their single source of energy. They're not relying on grid.
Yeah.
In fact, grid is backup power, right? So that's the way they're going. The problem you've got is that there's another 200 of those companies that would love to do the same thing, but they don't have a gas supply. They don't have a forward outlook on when they can get a gas supply. We hear that Sasol is going to give us a firm date next year of us when MRG is going to come into the pipeline, what price it'll be at. Without that, none of the current industrial customers can make a decision to change their gas to power plans,
Fair enough.
and they can't do anything about it.
Selma, let me come to you. You advise, a number of companies as well as governments in your line of work with respect to attracting investment into their countries. Listening to all what you're saying, if you needed to tell us what are three essential policy reforms where you say, two or three, where you say you really need to be able to put this in place in order to ensure maximum value add when you're looking at the energy value chain, not just getting the resource and basically shipping it out, but if at all you're looking at value add, this is what you really need to have in place.
Thank you, Verna. I mean, definitely takes two to tango, right? So, policy certainty is definitely one of the key things.
I think we need to change that. It takes two to Afrobeat or or to Amapiano or whatever.
Yeah, it takes two to do the dance.
Yeah.
Policy certainty. We need the investors require stability, predictability, and transparency in terms of the country's policy outlook. What are you trying to achieve so that they know the rules of engagement? And I think it's been mentioned a couple of times throughout our discussions today, right? So once you have policy certainty, it lowers the country's risk profile, and it's actually just more cheaper, right?
How can and apologies for coming. How does one achieve that when we all live in 4-year cycles for elections, in some countries 5? Sometimes you have those national elections in 4-5 years, but you have regional local elections. You need to be saying things that ultimately might not lead to that policy stability. So how do you get to, as a government, navigate those political, choppy waters, as well as at the same time give investors that kind of long-term certainty you're talking about?
Verna, what I want to say before I answer your question is that it's not an African issue.
Yep.
Obviously, political uncertainty is found all over the world, developed countries as well as developing countries. I mean, I'll speak from a perspective of Namibia, where I'm from. You have the Vision 2030, which is clearly outlines the country's developmental goals. Yeah. So even though new governments do come into place, they don't really deviate much. You have to, of course, deal with a year or 2 years of a bit of uncertainty in terms of new leadership and re-engaging the leadership. But what I've seen is that the developmental goals, they tend to be quite steady, if you really think about it, right? So the other thing is, that's why I said it takes two, is very focused local content industrialization policy. So the policy certainty is good for the investor. From a government perspective, an African country perspective, we need to have strategic local content and industrialization policies. That's the only way we're going to be able to unlock value of our resources and then move to the next phase of value addition. And so local content beyond jobs, beyond procurement.
And when you say local content, many people hear different things when they hear local content. International investors might hear regulation to basically provide equity to investors who are not pretty much actually invested in the business in that sense. What do you really mean? In that sense.
I mean, creating in-country value. I mean, right now, at the moment, this pit to port, what do you say? I've been hearing this term the whole day.
Pit to port.
Yes. So our model is just to extract.
Yeah.
No one is adding value to Africa. It's actually quite interesting that where the G20 is happening right now in Africa, there's one country, yet we provide all the resources to the continent. So we need to create in-country value, making sure that there's an entire value chain in the country, not just taking out our raw materials. So it looks different in different countries. Some countries have regulations. A country like Namibia has a policy which guides you on how, in terms of local participation. But then we have stretched it a bit to include, for example, having a refinery, making sure we have energy security and some of that product is retained in the country for our developmental needs. The other thing also is now infrastructure development. It's a key question, especially in Namibia with all our discoveries. There's questions around where the development is going to happen, whether it's Lüderitz, whether it's Walvis Bay. Infrastructure is a backbone to unlock true value, right? However, the government, and when I was preparing for the discussion, I looked at Singapore, what Singapore did. Singapore, the government actually invested in infrastructure to kind of mitigate that early risk that we've been talking about. So, but that takes leveraging public-private partnerships, because obviously government cannot do it alone, it's super expensive. Okay. But at the same time, just like Kola had explained how he managed to get funding, so we have to leverage the financial institutions on the continent and partners who really want to add real value to Africa and not just extract.
Thank you for that. Let me move on to Loazi. You're representing BP South Africa, and BP South Africa's strategy, if I understood it correctly, when I'm looking around, is really around maximizing value in and around the entire value chain where you guys are involved. Can you just give us a sense of the BP story, what you guys see around that? We're looking at it from an African perspective, of course, because we're looking at the entire continent, but possibly there might be things that we can see with respect to how a particular major global corporate is looking at value maximization. What are some of the does and don'ts which you guys are doing within BP as you look at maximizing value within the entire value chain?
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Vena, for the question. Correct, BP Southern Africa has got quite a long history in South Africa. We just celebrated 100 years last year. So we are an entity that has got quite strong roots here in South Africa. And we're also not limited only in South Africa. In Africa as well, we participate in some of the upstream oil and gas sectors as a BP group. Maybe around the maximization of value, I think one of the things my colleague mentioned here around the gas issue, maybe I'll start there because I believe as BP, there is quite a critical role that we can play for gas in this country. There is no shortage of gas globally, including in Africa. As BP, we have 100% offtake of LNG in Mozambique, just in our doorstep as South Africa. And therefore, South Africa, we cannot say we have shortage of gas. Of course, it depends what type of gas we are looking for. One of the current challenges for South Africa from a gas perspective is around infrastructure. There has been talk for many years around building an LNG terminal. That has taken quite a long time to materialize. Of course, gas to power program, because that is what is required to anchor a terminal of that nature. The industrial gas is not sufficient to anchor that type of infrastructure. And therefore, it is quite critical that when you're looking at these projects, you look at a bundled approach. And when we have been talking about to various stakeholders, one of the things we had seen work in other parts of the world, in Africa, where BP has been involved in building up gas to power infrastructure, is that those sort of projects must be bundled, because when you go to the funders, you need to be showing where is the source of gas, who is the person building the infrastructure, and where is the offtake. And we're finding that the current methodology that we have approached in South Africa around having a disintegrated manner is causing quite a lot of delays. And therefore, we are saying as BP, we can really support South Africa's gas ambitions. We do have LNG, not only in Mozambique, in Mauritania and Senegal, in parts of Africa. We have started early production in that part of the world for gas.
I mean, just once, congratulations to BP, of course, Mozambique as well as GTA. But should we not be looking at gas which is being produced in South Africa? I mean, it's great. I also follow the discussions around the terminal, the import terminal. I think as an addition, yes. But I worry that, it becomes easier for us to play the import game, getting fracked gas out of the US and whatever, and then we ultimately leave the gas that is below our feet here in the Karoo or whatever for multiple reasons, which, we're hoping will get settled. What is your take?
Look, my take in that it's not an either or. You either import getting LNG or local production. I think those are complementary. Exploration is a long-term game. And therefore, what do you do between now and then before you've got discoveries and you're able to commercialize those gas reserves? You can't have the industry waiting for that. And therefore, both are quite important, and therefore both strategies should be, in my view, be pursued to make sure that the industry does not suffer as a result of that. Maybe moving away from a gas perspective, maybe just talking through really our downstream business here in South Africa. We see ourselves as the integrated fuels value chain, providing mobility and convenience. And we've been on the journey of that. Of course, a few years ago, an unfortunate incident where we had the refinery shut down as a result of flood, which was during the sale process. To make sure that we secure product supply for this country, we had to be very agile in standing up a product sourcing strategy, working with local oil companies in terms of the local refineries, and working with our trading and shipping organization to make sure that we are sourcing the molecules to make sure that we supply this country. We have quite a material market share in South Africa, and therefore for us it is quite critical that we keep the country running.
We have seen a couple of other majors who were in the sector here leave in the downstream. From what I'm hearing, BP is here to stay long term.
Yeah, I mean, currently, BP Group announced a reset strategy recently, early in the year, and South Africa is well positioned as part of that group strategy because we do have an integrated position and we are advantaged. So there is no intentions what we've been announced from a strategy perspective that BP is in South Africa for a long term to go.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just take last questions coming down because we're short of time. Selma, you look at value creation ultimately in the space. We should also be able to talk about that value ultimately sipping to different spheres of the society. Women, young people. There was all of that. What can the energy space do, or what does government need to do to be able to ensure involvement across the board within the sector as value gets created?
I think it's very important, again, I guess, speak to the policy. The policy has to really outline that roadmap. And for example, the Namibia energy policy, which I was privileged to work on, is very clear on mainstreaming gender in the energy sector. It's very clear on the participation of the youth in the industry. It's very clear on training.
But how do we get that to be the center of policy rather than to be peripheral? I do get the sense quite often across in multiple countries, whenever we talk about some of these things, that it's rather peripheral than being at the center of, urging, at the center of implementing policy.
I mean, it isn't. I think it is in the center, especially if most countries have a local content policy,
Okay.
and that speaks to local participation, but not only for businesses, but also how do we integrate youth and women in the industry. I mean, for example, in Namibia, we created the Petro Fund in 1992 before we even had discoveries, and the whole function of that fund is to ensure that we train Namibians to participate in the industry, but at all levels, not just at tertiary level, but also at vocational training. And also the policy dictates, or let me not say dictates, it guides companies to encourage them to do training, and it gives them incentives. And that is already part of the legal instruments. So I think it should be in the legal instruments.
Fair enough.
Can I say one thing on that? And it's
Yes, ma'am.
because I've been in the industry directly 21 years and sat on many of these conferences. I was actually really impressed today to see almost a 50-50 split, if not 60-40 women to men. That never happens, ever. So it's really impressive to see that the Energy Chamber's been able to bring that together.
Yeah.
You'd say the same. We've been at many a gas conferences together. I'm often the only woman in the room. And it's lovely to see. So well done to the Energy Chamber on that.
No, I think it's important, and that's one of the reasons why I brought it up, because, we try to push the conversation to ensure that this is at the center of whatever it is that we do with respect to value creation within the industry, and having young people as well as, women and others who have been in the past
The old people,
left
yes.
behind to be able to be at the center of that. From your perspective, last word, Clarke Energy, how do we get more megawatts from gas to power on the continent?
So from our perspective, it's molecule. There, as I say, I have customers waiting for them. Even to the extent of customers who have gas today in limited volumes, if they can get more volume, they will go and put their own gas to power stations in. A lot of people are looking at targeting carbon reduction, net zero, whatever you want to call it, for their global objectives, right? It might not necessarily be to align to what the government wants here, but it's more, what their company specifically says they have to do, which is fine. That's great for us. But to do that, they need to transition away from traditional fossil fuels from your coal or your traditional Eskom grid and move into an alternative way. Solar is obviously out there as a benefit,
Correct.
but it's not baseload power.
Correct.
Right? So a lot of them need to have baseload power in the form of a thermal fuel, gas being a 50% benefit on your carbon reduction. Right? Even LPG, if you can get from coal to LPG, you've got a 30% benefit in your carbon footprint. So whatever we can do to drive even LPG or natural gas molecules into the country, you will see projects zooming off. They're there, ready to happen. Demand is not the problem in this country.
Certainly. Demand is not the problem. Again, it's supply in terms of workforce and everything. Is that available as well?
I believe workforce is available. Upskilling is needed in some places. There are models that have been successful. In fact, we, over the past couple of years, developed about 2,000 artisans. And when we checked on the efficiency of that particular model, we found that we cold called 10% of the 2,200 of them, and 96% of them were employed. So they've gone through the training. Employability is important. So talking about skills and local content, it is important to bear in mind purpose. What is it for? And then making sure that industry is part of the curriculum. And part of what we did was to sit with industry, sit with the institutions, and develop co-developed curricula, which then meant that those trainees were trained in line with the demand. So one of the problems that we do have at the moment is I got a call the other day from one of our companies saying, Adrian, I have a problem. Our staff our skill is leaving in their plane loads to the UK.
To
So
the UK.
those are the
Okay.
exact words. So it's important.
Fortunately, Minister Natasha is not here. I'm
It's
sure there's-
important to oversupply.
Yes.
It is important to continue to develop appropriate skills, and it's important to then build on those capacity, the skills.
So we still do have the skills, but we are living in a situation where global competition is demanding and aggressively, pursuing, skills that are here. And so ultimately, there needs to be a competitive offer within South Africa as well as across Africa to retain those skills.
And we have to up the numbers
Okay.
so that we make sure there's an oversupply.
Yes.
So that it's fine that they go to the UK and elsewhere in the world, but quality is key.
Last word from you, Nazim, to close off this panel. Where do we see SANPC in 5 years?
In 5 years' time, we want to be a fully integrated company from upstream activity, midstream activity and trading, as well as a presence in the downstream, as the first fully integrated South African company with a significant position in the South African market, and as a facilitator of the energy hub of Southern Africa being developed as Cape Town, or South Africa as the key part of driving the Southern Africa agenda.
Okay. Thank you so very much to this esteemed panel. Fortunately, we are way over time, so I have to end this here. I'm the one standing between your networking drinks and whatever else it is that you're looking to do at the networking. There is a networking function which will be happening at the Oldham Restaurant in the Leonardo Hotel. I think that's just 2 minutes walk down the road from here. So, ladies and gentlemen, please do well to join us there and to continue this conversation in a different setting. Thank you so very much to yourselves. Thank you so very much for you all for having been here today. And I look forward to seeing you again at our next Africa Energy event. Thank you. Thank you.